Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It helps YouTube recommend more of my videos to you. Now let's begin. I've done a lot of solo hikes over the years, but there's one trip that still keeps me up at night whenever I think about it. It happened about 3 years ago in the North Cascades, a 3-day loop trail I'd been planning for weeks. I'm not new to the outdoors. I'm a 28-year-old software developer from Seattle, and hiking is pretty much how I reset after weeks of staring at code and screens. I'm careful, always prepared, and honestly, I'm not the superstitious type. You hear stories about people getting bad vibes in the woods. That's never really been me. I like the quiet, the isolation. It's grounding. The weather that weekend was perfect. Clear skies, light wind, the smell of pine and wet earth everywhere. I remember thinking how alive the forest felt, even though I hadn't seen another person all day. The trail was remote, miles away from any small town. I'd lost cell service halfway through the drive up, and by the time I parked at the trailhead, it was just me, the mountains, and that endless green silence. The first day went smooth. Long climb, steady pace. I camped by a river, made dinner, and fell asleep listening to the water. It was peaceful in a way that city life never is. The kind of silence that makes your thoughts sound loud. By the next morning, I felt completely detached from everything. No noise, no emails, no people. Just trees, fog rolling over the ridges, and the crunch of my boots on the dirt. It was somewhere around midday on the second day when I stopped to rest on a high ridge overlooking a valley below. I remember taking out my binoculars to scan the landscape, just a habit. That's when I noticed him, a man, standing dead still in a small clearing far below me. At first I thought nothing of it, maybe another hiker. But even from that distance, something about him looked off. He was wearing a dark green jacket, just standing there, facing directly up at me. And that's when I realized he wasn't moving, not even a little. At first, I figured it was just coincidence. Maybe he happened to be looking in my direction. I waved anyway, a small, friendly gesture like hikers usually do when they spot each other on the trail. He didn't wave back. He didn't even shift his weight or raise a hand. He just stood there, facing uphill toward me. I remember waiting for him to move, maybe bend down to grab something, maybe turn away. But he didn't. The binoculars were good ones, clear enough that I could see details. His jacket looked almost military. Dark green, heavy material. Hood up. His stance was stiff, straight, like someone standing at attention. The more I stared, the more I noticed how wrong the stillness looked. No wind moving through his clothes, no tilt of the head, just motionless. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was using binoculars too. Maybe he was watching wildlife or looking at the same view I was. Still, something about it left a strange feeling in my stomach, like I wasn't supposed to be seeing him. After a minute or two, I decided to move on. I packed my stuff, took one last glance through the binoculars. He was still there. Same spot, same stance. As I started down the trail again, I caught myself glancing back over my shoulder every few minutes. Each time I half expected to see him closer, but the trees swallowed the view of the clearing, and eventually I couldn't see him at all. For the next few hours, I hiked fast. The trail wound through thick forest, tall, mossy trunks, and patches of fog that drifted between the trees. Everything was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just my boots crunching over dirt and twigs. I tried to shake it off. It was just another hiker. People do weird things sometimes, stand around, zone out. I told myself that. But that image, that still unblinking figure, kept replaying in my mind like a photograph burned into my head. By the time I reached the lake where I'd planned to camp, the sun was already dipping behind the ridgeline. The water was perfectly still, black and glassy, reflecting the orange light from the sky. It was beautiful, the kind of view that makes you forget the world exists. But even as I set down my pack and started setting up my tent, that same uneasy feeling crept back in, like someone was nearby, quietly watching from the trees. It's strange how your instincts know before your brain does. While I was unpacking by the lakeshore, that heavy feeling, the one where your back tightens and you just know someone's eyes are on you, hit me hard. I froze for a second, then slowly scanned the tree line. Nothing, just still forest. But I couldn't shake it. I kept glancing over my shoulder as I cooked dinner, pretending I wasn't creeped out. The woods go quiet in the evening, but this was different. There was no sound at all, Atanan, not even the wind. The water was so calm that it looked like glass. I could see the reflection of the sky, the trees, even my own movement as I sat by the fire. When I finally couldn't take it anymore, I grabbed my binoculars again and aimed them across the lake. It wasn't a huge lake, maybe a quarter-mile across, bordered by thick pine forest. And there he was, the same man, same dark green jacket, standing at the tree line across the lake, half shrouded in shadow, facing directly toward me. I froze. I didn't even breathe for a second. There was no question this time. It was the exact same person I'd seen on the ridge earlier. Same stance, same unnatural stillness. The distance I'd hiked that day made it impossible. Between where I'd spotted him and where I was now, there were ravines, steep climbs, and narrow switchbacks that would have taken hours. And that's if someone knew the trail perfectly. Yet there he was, like he'd been waiting for me. I lowered the binoculars for a moment, blinked hard, then raised them again, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. But he hadn't moved an inch. He was just there, staring across the water. My hands were shaking now. The air felt colder than it had all day, and I remember suddenly feeling incredibly small, like every sound I made carried straight to him. I sat there for a long time, trying to come up with an explanation. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe it was a tree stump that looked like a person, but deep down I knew it wasn't. There was a weight to the moment, a tension in the air that told me I wasn't alone. When the sun finally disappeared and the forest turned black, I tried to distract myself. Ate, zipped up the tent, turned off my headlamp. But sleep didn't come. Sometime after midnight, I noticed a faint, flickering light across the lake. A campfire. It was small, weak, but enough to make out a figure standing near it. The man again. Facing the water. Facing me. I lay in my sleeping bag, eyes wide open, trying not to move. The sound of my own heartbeat was deafening. He didn't come closer. He didn't do anything. He just stood by that tiny fire all night. I didn't sleep a second. And by the time the sky started to lighten, I was already packed. I didn't eat breakfast. Didn't even boil water for coffee. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. When I finally unzipped the tent and stepped outside, the lake was calm again. Mist hovered over the surface like smoke, and everything was painted gray and quiet. I looked across the water. No campfire, no movement, no man. Part of me wanted to believe I'd imagined everything. That exhaustion and paranoia had just messed with my head. But even as I thought that, I couldn't shake the memory of those eyes across the lake, that unblinking stare. I started hiking. Fast. I didn't stop to rest, didn't take any pictures. Every sound, snapping twig, a gust of wind, made me turn my head. The forest didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt alive, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. About 2 miles in, I started hearing it. Faint, crunching behind me. Not steady footsteps, just occasional snaps of branches spaced apart, like someone matching my pace but keeping their distance. I'd stop. The sounds would stop. I told myself it was deer, maybe a bear. but I'd been in the woods enough to know what wildlife sounded like. This wasn't that. This was deliberate. I picked up my pace. My shoulders were aching from my pack, but I didn't slow down. Every few minutes I'd glance over my shoulder, expecting to see that green jacket somewhere between the trees. Nothing. Just forest shadows and filtered sunlight. At one point, I swear I heard breathing, a faint exhale that didn't belong to me. Right before the wind picked up and drowned it out, my pulse was hammering so hard that my vision blurred for a moment. The trail felt endless. It twisted through valleys and climbed ridges, and I barely remember any of it. My brain was just locked on one thought. Don't stop. It took hours, but eventually I started seeing signs that I was getting close. The faint hum of the road, the smell of car exhaust drifting from somewhere beyond the trees. I've never been so happy to see a parking lot in my life. When I reached my car, I threw my pack in the back seat and just stood there trying to calm my breathing. I didn't see anyone else around. The air was still. For a few seconds, I just leaned against the car, staring back at the trail like it might spit that man out any second. He never came. I sat there in the driver's seat for a long time, trying to convince myself it was over. The kind of adrenaline crash where your hands won't stop shaking and your heartbeat still feels like it's echoing in your ears. Eventually, I started the engine and just sat with the heater running, staring at the empty trailhead through the windshield. Everything looked normal again, birds chirping, sunlight on the trees, a few cars parked in the distance. Just another weekend morning in the Cascades. After a while, my phone buzzed. I hadn't had service in 2 days, so a bunch of notifications came in all at once. Missed messages, emails, and a few uploads from my hiking blog. I'd set my camera to automatically post a trail journal photo whenever I had a signal. One of the new notifications said, "Auto upload complete, sunset at Lost Lake." It took me a second to realize what that meant. It was from the night before. The shot I'd taken right before dark, standing at the edge of my campsite. I didn't even remember taking it, honestly. It must have been right before I noticed the light across the water. Curious, I opened it. The picture was beautiful at first glance. Calm water reflecting the orange sky, the trees in silhouette, the faint glow of the setting sun spilling over the ridge. It actually made me smile for a second. For a brief moment, it almost erased the fear. Then I zoomed in. Across the lake near the tree line, there was a shape, a person. At first, it was just a dark outline, but the longer I looked, the clearer it became. The dark green jacket, the posture. And when I zoomed all the way in, the face, pale, expressionless, eyes wide open, locked straight at the camera. And the worst part wasn't just that he was there, it was how close he was. In my memory, he'd been across the lake standing near his fire. But in the photo, he wasn't by the fire at all. He was maybe 100 feet from my tent, right at the edge of the trees, staring straight into the lens. I remember my throat tightening. I kept staring at that photo, hoping it would blur, that I'd see something different if I blinked enough times, but no. His face stayed there, sharp and clear, with those eyes that looked like they hadn't blinked in hours. I deleted the picture immediately. I don't even know why. Maybe because part of me thought deleting it would make it unreal, like erasing it could somehow undo what happened. But it didn't. Even now, years later, I can still see that face whenever I close my eyes. Pale skin, dark eyes, that rigid stare. Sometimes when I'm out hiking and I catch a reflection in the trees or see someone in the distance, I get that same sinking feeling in my gut. I never saw him again. Never found out who he was or if he was even human. But sometimes when I dream about that forest, I'm back at the lake. And he's still there, standing at the edge of the trees, watching. I've been backpacking most of my adult life, and I've seen some weird things out on the trails. Abandoned shacks, strange carvings, even a half-buried car once. But nothing ever got under my skin the way what we saw in West Virginia did. It was me, my girlfriend Lena, and our husky mix, Willow. We'd planned a 5-day backpacking loop through a remote section of the Monongahela National Forest, one of those areas where you can go a whole day without running into another soul. We'd researched every mile, packed carefully, and even printed backup maps in case GPS failed. That's just how we are. We plan for everything. By the 3rd day, everything had gone perfectly. The air was crisp, the forest quiet but beautiful, the kind of trip that resets your brain. We just finished a late breakfast when we realized we'd drifted a bit off the main trail, maybe half a mile or so. No big deal. The GPS still showed we were close, so we decided to cut straight across a patch of rhododendron to reconnect. It was thick and tangled, the kind of brush that grabs your pack straps and scratches your arms no matter how carefully you move. But after about 10 minutes of pushing through, we came out into a small clearing, and that's when we both stopped. In the middle of the clearing stood a staircase. Just a staircase. A wooden one, maybe 15 feet tall, freestanding, leading up to nowhere. It looked like it had been ripped straight out of an old house and dropped in the woods. Lena muttered, "What the hell is that?" And I couldn't even answer, because I had no idea. The first thing that struck me was how wrong it looked. The staircase didn't belong there. It was made of old, weathered wood, gray and splintered but still sturdy. There were about a dozen steps leading up, maybe 15 feet high, ending abruptly in midair. No platform, no railing, no foundation underneath, just stairs. Standing perfectly upright in the middle of an empty clearing. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The forest was dead silent. No wind, no birds, not even the usual hum of insects. Just stillness. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're being watched. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a leftover from an old ranger station or part of a cabin that had long since rotted away. But there was no debris, no signs of a structure ever being there. The ground around it was smooth, covered in moss and pine needles. If a building had stood here, it would have left something. A foundation, nails, even just disturbed soil. Willow, our dog, started whining. Her tail tucked down and she backed up until the leash went tight. She's never been afraid of anything. Thunder, strangers, nothing. But she wouldn't go near those stairs. The hair along her spine was raised and her ears were flat against her head. That's when we heard thump sound, faint at first, then again a few seconds later. It was slow, rhythmic, not mechanical, not like footsteps, more like something heavy pulsing deep beneath the ground. Lena looked at me, her face pale. "You hear that?" I nodded, my stomach dropping. The sound didn't seem to be coming from any one direction. It was just there, vibrating faintly through the earth under our boots. We both stepped back instinctively and Willow began to whimper louder. The longer we stood there, the heavier the air felt, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Finally, I said, "Let's go around. Just keep moving." And we did, giving that staircase as wide a berth as we could manage. We circled wide around the clearing, keeping the staircase in view until the trees swallowed it up again. I kept expecting to feel relief once it was out of sight, but the unease didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. The forest felt off, like something had shifted when we saw it. We kept walking, following the GPS arrow on my phone. It told us we were looping back toward the main trail, but the deeper we went, the more it felt like the woods didn't want us to leave. The air was heavy, humid, and every sound seemed muffled. Our footsteps, the rustling of branches, even Willow's panting. About 20 minutes later, Lena froze. "Look," she whispered. Through the trees, maybe 50 yards away, stood another staircase. This one was made of stone, thick, cracked slabs covered in moss, winding upward like it once led to a castle tower. But there was nothing above it, just open air. I felt my chest tighten. I remember glancing at the GPS again. Still tracking fine, still moving north. This didn't make sense. We changed direction, moving carefully, and before long I saw another one. This time metal, half-rusted and spiraling up into the canopy. The sunlight hit it through the trees, giving it this dull, sickly gleam. It felt like the forest was playing tricks on us, showing us things that couldn't possibly exist. The thumping started again, louder this time. Willow yanked on the leash, whining and trying to pull ahead. Lena's breathing was fast now. She grabbed my arm. "Mark, what the hell is happening?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was keep moving, eyes darting around. At one point, I swear I saw something move, a flicker of motion at the top of one of the staircases, just a blur. Maybe light through the leaves, maybe not. The trees felt closer now, the path tighter. The forest floor seemed to subtly tilt under our feet like the terrain was warping. I kept checking the compass, the GPS, anything to reassure myself we weren't just walking in circles. But the dread never let up. The thumping faded, came back, faded again, like whatever it was beneath us was pacing. Neither of us said a word after that. We just kept walking faster and faster, Willow practically dragging us forward until finally, through the trees ahead, I saw something that nearly made me cry with relief. The trail marker, the main path. We broke through the brush and stumbled back onto solid, familiar ground. The moment our boots hit the main trail, it was like stepping back into reality. The air changed, lighter, warmer. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves again, birds somewhere in the distance. All those normal forest sounds that had been missing came rushing back, and only then did I realize how silent it had truly been back there. We didn't stop walking. We just followed the trail in the direction of our camp, moving fast but trying not to look like we were running. Every few minutes I glanced back over my shoulder. The trees behind us looked darker, denser somehow, like the forest was swallowing the path we'd just come from. The thumping, that slow, deep vibration, faded completely after a while. I didn't mention it, and neither did Lena. I think we were both afraid that talking about it would make it start again. When we reached our camp, we barely spoke. We just packed up quietly, even though it was still early. Neither of us wanted to spend another night out there. By the time we got back to the car, the sun was setting, and it felt like we'd left something behind. Or maybe like something had let us go. A few weeks later, back home in Austin, curiosity got the better of us. We pulled up our GPS track from that day just to see if we could figure out where we'd wandered. Everything looked normal, until we got to the section where the trail went off course. That area, the clearing, the place where we saw the staircases, was completely blurred out on the satellite map. Not pixelated or low resolution, just a smudged green void like someone had painted over it. We checked on 3 different apps, all the same. Lena just stared at the screen for a while and then quietly said, "Let's not go back there." And we haven't. Even now, when we're hiking somewhere new, I catch myself scanning the woods every so often. Sometimes I'll see something vertical in the distance, a tree stump, maybe an old fallen log, and for a split second my chest tightens. Because part of me can't help thinking, what if it's another staircase? Just standing there waiting. I've always preferred hiking alone. It's not about isolation for me, but it's about clarity. I'm a geology professor, and the desert has always been my classroom. Out there, among the layered cliffs and carved canyons of Utah, I feel like I can hear time itself. The silence, the patterns in the stone, the heat rising from the ground. It all makes sense to me. I've spent years hiking these places alone, sometimes for days at a time. I trust my instincts, my maps, my equipment. I've never been one for superstition or ghost stories, but there's one hike I'll never forget. Because for once, the desert gave me something I can't explain. It was early afternoon and I was in a remote part of the Escalante region, documenting some unusual erosion patterns. Everything about the day felt normal. Clear skies, the hum of cicadas, the faint smell of heat and sand. Then I noticed it. A shadow in the distance tucked between two sandstone cliffs. At first, I thought it was just a darker fold of rock. But when I moved closer, I saw that it wasn't a shadow at all. It was a narrow side canyon, hidden and perfectly straight, like someone had sliced through the rock with a knife. I checked my topographic map. Nothing. No contour, no marker. Even my GPS didn't show a split. I hesitated just for a second before deciding to check it out. The walls rose up sharply on both sides as soon as I stepped in, smooth and streaked with violet and rust-red bands. The light dimmed and the air felt heavier, still like it was holding its breath. There were no echoes, no birds, not even the faint rustle of sand shifting in the wind. I followed a dry creek bed deeper into the canyon, brushing my hand along the stone as I walked. The surface was warm and strangely textured, almost like polished bone. I noticed faint spiral markings along the rock. Not carvings, not natural either, but something in between, as if the stone itself had grown that way. I made a mental note to take a photo on my way back. That's when I saw them, the footprints. At first I assumed they were mine, reflected in the uneven sand. But when I crouched to look closer, my stomach tightened. They were barefoot with long, splayed toes, and they sank deep into the sand, far deeper than any normal step should have. Whatever made them had to be incredibly heavy, and they were fresh. The dread hit me hard and fast, the kind that starts in your gut and climbs up your spine. I stood up, brushing the dust from my hands, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of animal track. Maybe erosion made them look human. "Nope," I said out loud, trying to laugh it off. "Not today." I turned around to head back and froze. The canyon behind me didn't look the same. The familiar ridges and cracks I'd noted were gone or subtly changed, as if the stone had shifted while I wasn't looking. Even the light felt wrong. Too flat, too dim. I pulled out my GPS. The signal blinked in and out before settling on a single dot that floated over blank terrain. The map didn't even show a canyon anymore. My compass needle spun slowly, refusing to pick a direction. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. I started walking quickly, following what I thought was the way I came, but every turn looked identical. Then I heard it. The faint scrape of rock above me, like something shifting along the canyon rim. I looked up, squinting against the glare, but there was nothing there. I tried to convince myself it was just a loose stone falling. But before I could take another step, I heard something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Anya. My name, spoken in my own voice. Anya. Over here. It came from ahead of me, just around the next bend. My blood went cold. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. It wasn't an echo, it wasn't distorted or far away, it was perfect. My tone, my cadence, everything. Then it came again, softer, almost coaxing this time. Anya, this way. Hurry, my mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe sound was bouncing strangely off the canyon walls. Maybe I'd spoken without realizing. But no. I hadn't said a word since I'd turned around. I felt my body tighten, every instinct screaming at me to get out. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate crunches in the sand from the same direction as the voice. Anya. Closer now. Too close. I turned and ran. The silence shattered beneath my footsteps. Every sound felt magnified. My breath, the gravel under my boots, the pounding in my ears. The air around me felt thick like running underwater. The voice followed me, always just out of sight, sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead, sometimes whispering right by my ear. "Anya, wait! Don't go that way. Over here!" It mimicked every emotion, pleading, calm, almost friendly, all in my exact voice. I refused to look back. I just kept running, heart hammering, until finally a burst of light blinded me. I stumbled forward and fell hard onto hot sand. The world opened up again. The canyon had spat me out into the main wash, sunlight flooding my eyes, wind rushed past my face, real wind this time, carrying the smell of sage and dust. I gasped like I'd just surfaced from drowning. The silence was gone. I could hear the world again. The canyon behind me stood dark and narrow like a slit in the earth. But as I stared at it, the shadows seemed to fold inward until it disappeared entirely. Just smooth, unbroken rock. My GPS screen flickered, glitched, then went blank. I stood there for a long moment before grabbing my pack and heading back to camp, not daring to look behind me again. That night I sat under a sky full of stars, reviewing my data. My GPS trail ended abruptly, right where I'd entered that canyon. After that, the coordinates turned into gibberish. Overlapping lines, random jumps, timestamps that didn't make sense. My heart sank as I opened my field recorder, something I always left running while I worked. I skipped ahead to the point where I'd entered the canyon, and for a few minutes it was just normal. The sound of wind, my boots, my breathing. Then there was a pause, and clear as day, I heard it again. My own voice, calm, steady, and close. "Anya, over here." I froze. I hadn't said that. I know I hadn't. I sat there for a long time in the dark, the desert cold seeping into my skin, staring at the recorder. The next morning I deleted the file, packed my gear, and drove home without saying a word. I've gone on dozens of hikes since then, but I've never gone back to Utah. And every time I'm out in the wilderness now, there's a moment, just a small one, where I swear I hear my name being called, always in my own voice. And that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these chilling stories. If you did, don't forget to drop a comment with your favorite one, hit that like button, and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales coming your way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.